Rev it up and welcome to Cars Yeah, show number 2203. Be prepared to be inspired.
This is Cars Yeah, where you'll enjoy interviews with inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Mark Green is here to provide you with a fuel injection of automotive inspiration. So get in, sit down, buckle up, and get ready for a wild ride here on Cars Yeah.
Hello, inspiring automotive enthusiasts, and welcome to Cars Yeah. Today I'm in beautiful Oakland, California with a very special guest by the name of Robert Yeager. Robert, welcome to Cars Yeah. Do you have it in gear, and are you ready to release the clutch?
All right, I've got my foot off the clutch.
All right, well, lay some stripes down, as they say. Now, before I give you a proper introduction, and we're going to talk today about a very cool book that Robert has written, I want to ask you one little thing. And I know your friends call you Bob. So, Bob, what's one thing that most people don't know about you?
Well, they probably don't know how I got started in writing about cars and getting interested in cars. And the answer is actually in my little office here, sitting up on a shelf. And I've had this for decades and decades since I was a kid. And what it is, it's my first gas-powered car, and it's what's called a spin dizzy. Do you know what that is?
I do know what those are. Yes, that goes way back.
Yeah, they are collector's items now, but they were made in the 1930s and 40s. They were model cars that boys got, and adults too, a lot of adults actually. And they were powered by gasoline engines that were used in model airplanes.
Right.
And these cars became very popular, and they even had races that many people, sometimes hundreds of people, would attend these races, and they built the tracks out of wooden slots, and the cars would race around. So they would go 130 miles an hour.
Oh my gosh.
And the other thing they're called is tether cars, because the more common way that hobbyists used them was they drove a stake in the ground, and there were wires attached, 2 wires to the side of the car, and they spun around this pole.
Yep.
That was my first gas-powered car. I got it when I was a preteen, and then later when I became a teenager, I acquired a 1940 baby blue Ford coupe, and it was raked and had headers, and that was a big deal.
Yeah.
That was kind of my start. And then in my 30s, I got into vintage Alphas and had a number of those, several of them. So I've really been an enthusiast about things automobilia ever since I was a kid.
Very cool. Yeah, I do know of those, and pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And the fact that you still have that on your shelf brings back your history. So I love it. What a great story. Well, it's a good lead into what we're going to talk about today. So let me give you a proper introduction. Robert C. Yeager's love for cars began as a teenager, and as he mentioned, when he purchased that raked baby blue 1940 Ford coupe for just $250. For the past dozen plus years, he has written about collectible and enthusiast cars for the New York Times. His additional credits include the Reader's Digest, Family Circle, Encyclopedia Britannica, I remember those, and many others. His novel, The Romanov Stone, won 2 national awards and was optioned for a film. An outgrowth of this writing for the Times is his new book, The NextGen Guide to Car Collecting, and it offers new and experienced collectors a richly illustrated and concise history of car collecting, guidance on buying and selling tips, on living and car collector life, how collectors love their special cars, and explores the growing role women play as automotive enthusiasts. Also discussed are how the internet and social media have transformed the car collector marketplace. The readers will learn how to buy a car online without suffering buyer's remorse. I think I need to learn that lesson. McKeel Haggerty, CEO of Haggerty, the world's largest insurer of classic and specialty vehicles, wrote the introduction of this fine book. We'll be back to learn a lot more from Robert, but first a word from our sponsors, so give them a little love, and we'll be right back. Autumn has arrived, the weather's changing, and that means your vehicles need extra protection against everything Mother Nature can drop. Covercraft offers you a multitude of layers of protection for your special rides. Are you putting your summer toys away, watercraft, RV, motorcycles, trailers, or even your patio furniture? Covercraft has a custom fit cover for whatever your need. Covercraft offers you 10 different car cover options. That's right, 10 for your special vehicle's protection, whether stored inside or out. All carefully crafted into the form and fit with the quality and attention to detail that's been their standard since 1965. And don't forget their custom fit seat covers, pet pad. Fido's going to get wet and muddy, I guarantee it. Dash mats, sunscreens, and custom fit floor mats and trunk mats. Whatever the surface you want to protect, Covercraft has your solution. If you use the code YEAH21 at covercraft.com, you'll get 10% off your Covercraft order. That's right, 10% off. Simply use the code YEAH21 at checkout. Come on, Mother Nature, bring it on. Covercraft, protecting the things that move you. I was tired of my rates for my collector car insurance going up every year for no explainable reason. My carrier seemed to be turning into a media company versus an insurance company, and I realized that a portion of my policy premium was paying for all those so-called free media goodies. So I did my homework, I talked to knowledgeable collectors, shopped around, and discovered American Collectors Insurance. They've been serving the collector car hobby since 1976. You last that long by properly serving your customers' insurance need, not with a lot of fluff. ACI is ranked the #1 online collector car insurance provider according to Google, Trustpilot, Facebook, and they offer their real person guarantee live support. No never-ending phone loops when you need help. Plus, because you don't use your classic car as a daily driver, you could save up to 40% compared to regular auto insurance. American Collectors Insurance provides agreed value policies. So if you experience a total loss to your collector vehicle or it's stolen, you'll be paid the amount listed on your declaration page, less any deductibles, of course. No ifs, ands, or buts. Give them a call today and ask for your free quote at 866-ACI-YEAH. That's 866-224-9324. Tell them you're a friend of mine, Mark Greens at Cars Yeah. American Collectors Insurance. Classic car insurance designed by collectors for collectors. Fall is here, and you know what that means. Time to put a good coat of protection on your vehicle. I'm teamed up with AutoGeek, and they've been the leading source of auto detailing products, accessories, and expert knowledge for more than 20 years. What started back in 1997 as a small mail-order catalog company grew into a multi-website based e-commerce store, and that's what they are today. With a large online presence on its own website featuring close to 100 different brands, AutoGeek has grown to be the largest car care retailer in the country. AutoGeek's wholesale program serves accounts in over 30 countries, and its retail sector ships worldwide. If you want to protect your vehicle this fall, and you should, go to autogeek.net for the best product selection on the internet today and technical support. Autogeek.net is where I go for my detailing needs. That's autogeek.net. So, Robert, we are back. So this book you've written, I find it wonderful for a variety of reasons. It's huge. It's 192 pages. It's very, very thorough. And one of the things I love about it is I talk to so many people in the car industry, and the worry is always, will there be young people around to take care and be custodians for these fine cars? The answer is yes, is what I've learned after interviewing so many people. But I want to have you walk us through this book a little bit and talk a bit by bit about the different chapters and some of the things that you've covered. And then I'm going to integrate some of my questions that I normally ask my guests into what you've learned in writing this book. So first, what created the system, or why did you write this book and focus on young people?
Well, it's really an outgrowth, Mark, of my dozen or so years writing about collector cars and enthusiast cars for the New York Times. Because what happened was when I started writing about the cars, which would have been, around early 2000s or before 2010 anyway, the hobby was really dominated by the white hairs.
Or the no hairs in my case.
Or the no hairs, yeah. And it was very interesting because that held true really for several years. But I sort of used the year 2014 as kind of a mark when I really sensed a kind of groundswell of change. And that was the year Gary Cooper's Duesenberg sports car was auctioned at during the Pebble Beach Car Week.
Yeah, I remember that.
You remember that?
Yeah.
It was a beautiful car. Only two were made. The other one was owned by Clark Gable. And the car was estimated to sell for $10 million. Instead, it sold for $22 million and became the most expensive American car ever publicly sold. And something about that happened, that kind of, in my mind, kind of crystallized the changes that were going on in the enthusiast car hobby, and how they were actually becoming an investment. Cars were becoming an investment. And the other thing that I was starting to hear from people in the car auction business, people like that work for Bonhams and auctioneers like David Gooding and so on, was that the buyers of these cars were getting younger. And so I checked with my all things numerical about cars and the car hobby. And sure enough, they were picking this up in their data. And, they have these programs you can tap where you can find out, what kind of enthusiasm there is for a car, who's buying the cars, and so on. And they were detecting a real demographic change, that the buyers were getting younger. And in fact, one reason, is in the last couple of years, they picked up that, and this is due probably to the salaries that people are getting in the high tech field.
Yes.
That the second group demographically after baby boomers who were buying $10 million and up cars were the millennials. Very, very well off people in their 30s. Now that's not. It's more typical that younger people are getting it at a lower level, but the numbers are really changing on the age level of people who are getting interested in the hobby. And, I just kept seeing that and hearing that. And I started thinking, there really should be a book for these gateway collectors, something that would take them really from the history of the automobile all the way up to the future. And so that's what the chapters begin with the history. And the first couple of chapters talk about historical things, like, the first car was the first automobile was really this car, and I think it was 1769. It was a French steam car. It was practically impossible to drive because the pot of water sat over the front wheels and made it very difficult to steer. And so not surprisingly, it also became the first automobile to be in an accident, kind of swerved into a wall.
Understeer.
Yes. And then we go in, through, I think 1896 was the first real automobile, which was Carl Benz's motor wagon. And we go on through the historical things. One interesting historical point is that in 1900, there were actually more electric cars sold than gasoline cars.
Well, things have come back around we're getting close to it. Interesting.
But beware, because by 1930, there were no electric cars at all. But Henry Ford's wife drove an electric car until 1914.
Wow.
So, and anyway, I take the reader through the history, and we talk about the era of consolidation and the great years of design in the 1930s and 40s. And then we go into how to buy a car. I also discuss the growing role of women in the hobby of car collecting and car enthusiasm. When I was writing that chapter, I found out that a woman, Baronessa Maria Antonietta Alvanzo, an Italian woman who was very wealthy and very beautiful, had actually raced against Enzo Ferrari and been a teammate of Tazio Nuvolari, who was the greatest driver in the world in those days. So, of course, and then I went again to my sources at Haggerty, and I found out that they were picking up an increase in the number of women who were interested in enthusiast cars and vehicles. And it was still a small number, but it had grown quite a bit in those years between 2010 and 2020.
Oh, absolutely.
And so then the book takes you through 3 different chapters that separately talk about buying an American car, buying a European car, and buying a Japanese car. And I tried to offer some suggestions They are only suggestions. I wanted to get the reader thinking about what you'd think about when you and try to give them some good candidates in those categories. And so there's a discussion of some candidate cars that might make sense for someone getting their first enthusiast car. And then we go on with chapters about living with a car, loving a car, and selling a car. And finally, I wrap up with a chapter on the future. And I was very lucky because, my book is generational, you might say, and that it's aimed at the next gen. And luckily enough, there were two father and son teams in the San Francisco Bay Area who are world known. I mean, one is Patrick Otis and his son Tazio, who restore vintage Ferraris, Alfa Romeos, and other cars. They're located in Berkeley. They're known all over the world. I'll never forget one night I was in their shop, and I was standing next to an engine stand. There was a V12 Ferrari engine there, and it turned out it was the engine from the car that had just been sold for, I think it was in the $50 million range. It was at the time, the most expensive car ever publicly sold. And there it was in Patrick's shop for the engine to be overhauled.
I wonder if that was Greg Witten's Ferrari that was sold a few years back for, I think, $48 million plus commissions and so forth.
Well, I believe it probably was. Of course, the more expensive Ferrari now, I guess the most expensive one is the one that the gentleman from WeatherTech bought.
Oh, yeah, David's $70 million plus car. Ah.
Yeah, and that has been eclipsed by, as I'm sure you well know, the Mercedes that was sold earlier this year for $143 million.
Yeah, out of the museum. Yep. Yeah, it's incredible. I love a lot of aspects of the book, and there's so many different things you touch on. I have to ask you this, as you were going through this, was there one thing that stood out for you that a young collector should really most pay attention to? Is there one thing that you, and I'm kind of leading you to what I think I know the answer is, but we'll see where you go with this. As a young person wants to get into, because we talked about some very expensive cars today, and majority of people can't afford to get into those levels of cars. However, there's lots of options at lower levels. Everything from, I have a friend that just bought a Panhard. And for those of you listening to go, well, what? Look it up, a Panhard that he's restoring. He's a young guy in his 30s, but he loves unique cars like Fossil Vegas and so forth. But is there something that came through to you to help advise a young person that how they should get into this world of having a fun toy car or collector car?
Well, if there's one kind of piece of advice that I've gotten from many sources and I myself think is true, it never hurts to pay a lot more for a really, really good car.
Yes.
That's really, because paying more at the front end will very often save you untold dollars as you go through the car. So buy the best car you can. That's really the rule.
Yeah, Bruce Meyer, who's the consummate quintessential car collector out of Los Angeles, a big part of the Peterson Museum, his quote is, buy the best car you can possibly afford and cry only once and never look back. And it's absolutely true. The other piece of this is where I was trying to focus you on, and I think you'll agree with me, is buy a car you love. Don't buy a car expecting to make money on it unless that's your profession and you know the industry really well, because speculation is a tough deal to do, but find a car that you really love. And you touch on that quite a bit. One of your chapters is find your tribe. And I always tell people,
yes,
join a car club and be around people that love these cars and know these cars before you find a car, because they will help guide you in the right direction.
That is absolutely true, and I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, you want a car that you can love, especially if you are, as the book is intended, primarily for the gateway collector. If this is your first collector car, you want to drive it. You don't want to just have it in a garage and look at it. You want to enjoy it. And, it's good for the cars. As I've heard Patrick Otis say, you want to get that car out and let the cool air blow over that engine block,
Yeah.
and just drive it, and exercise it. I have a very low mileage Mercedes, but, I'm not going to sacrifice the need of that car to be driven just to keep it in low mileage. I drive it regularly, and maybe you drive it for short distances, but you give it a, good exercise. But that's absolutely critical.
Yeah, it's important. I've bought many cars over my years based on condition and low mileage, and every one of those has ended up costing me quite a bit to get them somewhat roadworthy, because cars, like airplanes, like any mechanical device, even if you like fine Rolexes, they don't sit well. They need to be moving because things dry up, seals dry up, and so forth. So that's a big part of it. I like to ask my guests about mentors or driving inspirations. Is there somebody that's been in your life that has been very influential and key to your career path?
Well, I guess there's been a number of people, but certainly my uncle. I had an uncle who was a car nut, and he could take a car apart and, just fix anything, and loved cars. And he was a very influential figure in my life. But I've had mentors all along the way. I had a great automotive editor at the New York Times, James Cobb, and he knew all about cars and more than I'll ever know. And I've had a great mechanic for many years, and you learn from all those people. You learn, as you say, in your tribe, you learn from other people who have owned the car that you want or that you have, and they're all mentors, and they're absolutely critical to have that circle of people, and I just can't imagine, for example, going out and buying a 50-year-old Porsche or something without knowing people who own these cars and can guide me. Now, that's one of the great things about this website, Bring a Trailer. They have all these commenters that many of them really know a lot about the car that's for sale. But you need more than that. You need people you can talk to and hang with and so on.
After interviewing so many people, I've learned a key thing about the automotive industry is not the cars, it's the people. You meet the most interesting people, and almost everyone who's into cars will talk to you about their car, and they love for you to ask questions. So I always advise, especially young people, go to car shows, go to Concours events, go to races, walk up to people and ask questions and be a good listener. And you will learn so much that you never thought, maybe more than you want to learn. We're going to take a short break for our sponsors again. When we come back, I want to talk about maybe some challenges you came up against in putting this book together. So keep that thought in mind, and we'll be right back. 20, 50, or 100 years from now, will there be a workforce to care for the collector vehicles we love? With auto shop programs disappearing across the country, it's a question we enthusiasts have to ask. That's why I support the RPM Foundation, which exists to ensure that the critical skills necessary to preserve and restore these vehicles aren't lost to time. One of the many ways RPM, which is short for Restoration, Preservation, and Mentorship, is accomplishing this goal is through workforce development initiatives. The RPM Apprenticeship Program enables the next generation of artisans to earn a living while they learn the craft of restoring and preserving these vehicles directly from industry professionals. The Endangered Skills Program documents the process of masters training future craftspeople on a variety of critical skills in danger of being lost forever. For more information on how the RPM Foundation is driving the future of the collector vehicle skills trade, visit RPM Foundation today. They're one of the charities of choice here on Cars Yeah! You've heard me talk about Linkage Magazine here on Cars Yeah! For a couple of years now. Well, they're growing. And in 2023, they're going to grow from 4 issues a year to 6. And there's an opportunity here for you to take advantage of this growth. If you go to linkagemag.com and click on the Renew button, if you already subscribe, you can get a great deal. Use the code RENEW6 for 1 year, and you'll get 6 issues for the price of 4, or type in Renew 12 for 2 years, where you also have a great savings. Plus, they'll even throw in a free linkage hat. How cool is that? The publisher of Linkage is Donald Osborne. He's been a guest multiple times here on Cars Yeah. He's become a good friend of mine, and I'll tell you, Linkage Magazine is one of those newer magazines that you're going to want to get. It's all about experiences, opinions, and values. It's a wonderful publication, something I look forward to getting. And now that I'm going to be getting 6 a year, even more special. So go to linkagemag.com. Again, use the code Renew6 or Renew12 to get that special deal. Do it before December 31st, 2022, so that in 2023, you'll get 6 issues of Linkage Magazine instead of 4. So, Bob, I always ask my guests about a challenge. We call it the challenge question here, but I want to relate this to putting this book together. What was maybe one of the biggest challenges you faced in writing this book?
Well, I guess the breadth of the material, because I knew I wanted it to be a book, not, I want experienced collectors to like it and use it, but I also wanted to make sure it was a book that would be useful for what I think of as the gateway collector. And so the span of the book starts with history and it ends with the future, and it covers everything between. And, when I think about how I came to do it, it's really begins with my earliest reporting for the Times and all the way up to the present. That's all reflected in the book. And of course, I did a lot of interviewing and research and so on, especially for the book. I guess the challenge was the breadth of the book and covering as much as it did. It'd be one thing to write a book about a single car, but this is a book about the whole field, and so the breadth of it was a challenge, and with that, and it reflects all those years of writing about cars that I'd done before.
Chapter 12 in your book is titled The Road Ahead, and I want to touch on that a little bit. As you wrote this and you look at the future and young people in the future cars, what did you learn there? What are you seeing?
Well, I think I learned that I think we should be welcoming to the to the advent of electric power in automobiles, including vintage cars. And I have some reporting in that chapter about the cars that Jaguar and Aston Martin have built, where they've converted. In fact, Prince Harry and the Duchess, Meghan Markle. But when they left their wedding in England, they drove off in a Jaguar 120 that had been converted to EV.
That's right, yeah.
And Aston Martin has produced a DB6 EV model. And now, and this I found out when I was writing the book, there are now a couple of companies in England that are converting classic cars to EV.
Yep.
And I think there's a real possibility that will expand during the future. I also think, however, that it's easy to be swept up by over-enthusiasm in the future of electric cars. I think fossil fuels are going to be around for many, many, many years. I think to force the adoption of automobiles into electric operation is a risky business, and
yep.
I think some people in Florida who watched their Teslas catch on fire in the flooding are learning that lesson very painfully. There are definite, risks in the EV field, and among them is the whole battery picture. Is that really solved? How much does it cost to replace the batteries in your car? Whoa, watch out. Stand by for a blast. I want to be optimistic about the future, and the future of collecting, I think, is very strong. I have verbatim interviews with Patrick Otis and his son, and also Bruce Trenery and his son Spencer, who also happen to live in the Bay Area and own a company called Fantasy Junction, which is really a globally known retailer of vintage cars. And, the sons, and this is why I was so glad to be able to interview them. Tazio is only 26 and Spencer's 42. So they fit perfectly, in the next gen category. And they're both very optimistic. All four of those men are optimistic about the future of vintage cars, and with good reason. I mean, look at what's happened to the market and how strong it is. And Bring a Trailer, do you realize Bring a Trailer is probably going to have $1 billion in sales this year?
No
Almost
doubt.
certainly.
Yeah.
They almost made it last year. So the strength of the market has been surprising and reassuring.
It really has. In fact, I sold a collector car that I'd had for 13 plus years on Bring a Trailer in June of this year. That car got a record for the kind of car in year it was, which still holds on Bring a Trailer. It was a great experience for me. I did an entire podcast about it with Rafi Manazian, a designer who also helps people sell cars on Bring a Trailer. He helped me sell my car. And of course, Randy Nonnenberg, I've had him on the show several times talking about Bring a Trailer and how successful he's been with that business and selling it. So yeah, the world and the future of collectible cars, EV cars, there's a renaissance going on, a lot of exciting things. But I want to talk to you about your personal passion for cars. Is there one special car that you've had in your life that really stands out? And if so, what was it? Or what is it?
Well, I did. I had a car for many years, and it was an Alfa Romeo 2600 Touring Spider, and it was a beautiful car to look at. It was a very interesting car to drive. It had a double overhead cam, i6 aluminum engine. It's one of the best engines I've ever had in a car. Very low maintenance, lots of torque and power. The one thing that's sad about that car is that Alfa Romeo did not focus a little more attention on the suspension system because it's a heavy car, and it's not a car that you take through the twisties like the Giulietta Alphas were, and I've owned those too. It was so beautiful, and it had so much torque. And it was so reliable. It was just a memorable car. And I had it for 20 years, I think, and finally sold it for many times what I paid for it. That was one that really sticks out. Certainly the Alfa Romeo Giulietta, I had a 750 Spider. That's a wonderful car and so fun to drive. I have other cars I've loved, and right now I have a Lexus 300 SC, the Series 1 Lexus coupe. Gorgeous car and unbelievably reliable. But that 2600 Alpha will always stand out.
Sounds wonderful. So I'm going to be your car psychologist today a little bit. Probably a unique question you've not heard before. I'm going to crawl into your head. If you were reincarnated, pun intended, manifest as a vehicle, what would Bob be, but more importantly, why?
Gosh, that's a strange question, Mark.
It brings about some very unique answers, I'll tell you that.
I don't know. Well, it might well be that Alpha 2600 because I had such a strong emotional connection with that car. I don't know. It was just a really beautiful car, and it was so strong in terms of its reliability we went through some things with that car, getting it set up. The cars were delivered with a Solex carburetor system that was very problematic. And I don't want to go too far into the technical things, but it had a two-throat system. The second throat would open up when the car was going fast, but it had a rubber valve in it. And those rubber valves could wear out and stick. And if they stuck, you ran the very likely risk of burning a valve. So the first thing that we did with the car, my mechanic and I, was we switched those carburetors to Webers.
Yeah.
And it just made a huge difference. We got them dialed in right, and the car, the beautiful idling, beautiful everything. And after that, it was like owning a Honda. I mean,
now there's the quote.
Well, I mean, it was because you just never had to spend much money on it. I mean, it was just ridiculous how reliable it was. It really was.
I understand. I had a Karmann Ghia that I actually put some new carbs on that car, but a friend said, you got to switch those over to Webers. They're so much better. And I raced a Lotus 18 for years in vintage racing that had Webers on it that were just easy to work on and easy to make work. So I understand 100%. So this book, I always ask guests to recommend a book. Obviously, today we're going to be recommending this book by Bob, Robert C. Yeager's book, The NextGen Guide to Car Collecting, and the subtitle, How to Buy, Sell, Live With, and Love a Collectible Car. And the introduction, of course, was written by my friend, McKeel Haggerty, who's been a guest on the show here a couple times. So I'm going to enable you to go on the ultimate drive today, Bob. I'm going to buy you any car in the world. I'm that kind of a guy. You're going to be able to take it anywhere you'd like. And here's the key. You can take anybody with you, even somebody who's no longer with us, somebody from the past, which could make this drive very interesting. So what does the ultimate drive look like for you?
Well, now, do you want to know which car I'd be in?
Oh, let's start with the car, because it is Cars, yeah.
Okay. I'd be in that Alpha 2600.
Oh, we're back to the Alpha. Wow, okay.
Because with all its faults, it was a beautiful car to drive, as long as, you didn't have the real tight corners. But even then, if you had a few. And I would have my late friend, John McClay, who introduced me to that car, in the passenger seat. And I'd have my late dog, Samson, sitting there's back seats in that car, And he'd be sitting in the back with his nose in the air. And we would be driving up I have a second home in a place called the Sea Ranch in Northern California. And we would be on Highway 1, driving up the coast. And it would be a sunny day, and we'd be heading up the coast to Sea Ranch.
Nice. That sounds like a wonderful, wonderful drive. And you've taken us on a very cool drive today. I want to thank you for being my guest. But before I let you go, could you share some parting words of wisdom that might relate to the next gen who's going to be buying a collector car?
I think we've really already mentioned the two main points. Buy what you love and pay enough to get the best you can.
Yeah. Absolutely. Those are key words of advice for anybody at any point in your life buying an old vehicle. Get what you love first and pay as much as you possibly can. I've had so many friends who bought cars that they thought they got a deal on and had to do restoration, and it's always 3-4 times as much money as you thought it was going to be. So if you want to go out, unless you like restoring cars yourself in the garage or you love giving money to someone else to restore a car, buy the best you possibly can. How can people learn more about you and follow you, Bob?
Well, my book is on Amazon. It's right there. I have a website, www.robertcyeager.com. Some of my past history, Mark, which we didn't go into much, for a number of years, I wrote originals articles for the Reader's Digest.
Ah.
A number of my digest articles are there, and I guess that's as good a place to go as any, but mainly go out to Amazon and buy my book.
Absolutely. I'll put links to that, and you listeners, you regular listeners know there's a great place on the Cars Yeah website called Guest Recommended Books, where there's over 2,500 books listed there with quick, easy links to buy. And if you go to Robert's, or what we call him Bob, but Robert C. Yeager's show notes page on the Cars Yeah website, we'll put links there so you can get your hands on this book. And if you have a young person in your life, this would make a great holiday gift idea for that young person who's thinking about getting into car collecting. So there you go. We've saved you an enormous amount of time on shopping this holiday season. Bob, thanks for being so generous today with your time and your expertise and for sharing this new book with us today. This is fantastic. Until you and I talk again, my friend, I'll see you down the road.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's ride here at Cars Yeah. Drive on over to carsyeah.com to find show notes and inspiring automotive fun. Download your free copy of Filler Up, a fun book filled with gorgeous photographs of fuel filler fun, including quotes from more inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Download your copy today, and we'll see you next time on Cars Yeah.